Okay. So yesterday we started to examine the meaning of the Yerida, the descent of the Alter Rebbe, the descent of Yaakov Avinu. The pasuk says that Yaakov Avinu was afraid maybe he had sinned, and we were wondering how could we possibly say about Yaakov Avinu that he had sinned. Yaakov felt unworthy of God's promise because of his averis. What are we talking about? Similar question we had about the Alter Rebbe. What does it mean that the Alter Rebbe was afraid that the promise of the Baal Shem Tov, the Mishnah Magid, wouldn't be fulfilled because of his faults? What kind of faults was he referring to? So what we discovered was that there's something called godless Rishon and godless Sheni. There is something called the first level of greatness and the second level of greatness. And the way it works is that in order to go from the first level of greatness to a second level of greatness, there is a descent in between. You can't go from being Yaakov outside of Israel to being Yaakov inside of Israel without there being something lost in the middle. There has to be some kind of descent in between. And the reason why Yaakov felt that he had sinned wasn't that he actually had sinned, but because Hashem had shown Yaakov such closeness. So he asked, like, why does that mean that he's sinned? Because Hashem showed him closeness. What does that have to do with anything? And the answer is not that he actually thought that he had done wrong, but in comparison to where he had seen Hashem had brought him to, he felt like he was lacking. It wasn't that he actually was lacking. It wasn't that he actually made a mistake. But since he was about to go to a new, higher level, so in comparison to where he was going, because he saw Hashem has brought him to a closer place, he felt deficient. There's a very rich story of the Tzaddik Rebbe of Haradak, which I think which brings out this point very clearly. Rebbe of Haradak, 1 year after the Maggid had passed away, the Hasidim of the Maggid, including the Alter Rebbe, who was a Chassid, the Rebbe of Haradak before he became the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe was asked to please talk to Rebbe of Haradak. Why do you have to talk to him? He does not want to go dance with the Torah. Why wouldn't the Tzaddik Rebbe of Haradak want to dance with the Torah? Because he discovered 100 new meanings in the psukim that we say before dancing with the Torah, the Atares. So they asked Alter Rebbe to talk to him. He's really not coming out to dance with the Torah. What's going on? So the Alter Rebbe, there's different. I'm not sure exactly the way the Alter Rebbe talked to him. Was it privately, or did the Alter Rebbe convene a bezdin? Was there actually a Jewish court that he convened to summon the Rebbe of Haradak too? Either way, the conversation went like this. The Alter Rebbe asked him, "Why can't you come out to Ataresa?" He says, "How are we supposed to come out to Ataresa? I've just discovered 100 new meanings. Not 100 new meanings in it. I need to calibrate all these new interpretations, new insights, and process them. And how could I come to Ataresa without this?" So the Alter Rebbe said, "Is incorrect for two reasons. It's incorrect because of logic, and it's incorrect because of a story. It's incorrect because of logic," he said to the Rebbe of Haradak, because after you assimilate into your persona your new insight of Ataresa, your new 100 insights of Ataresa, you're going to discover 1,000 new meanings of Ataresa. Like it's Alter Rebbe said, for someone who climbs up a mountain, so he sees a lot farther. Once you climb this mountain, you're going to discover there's a lot more that you don't know about Ataresa. So you're never going to come to Ataresa. According to this idea that you have that you shouldn't come to Ataresa until you understand it, you'll never get there. And the second reason Alter Rebbe said was because of the following story. It's incorrect because of logic, and it's incorrect because of a story. What's the story? There was Reb Chaim and Zlata who had this house next to this mountain. Whenever it rained, the mud would get into the house. So they decided, they had this little decrepit hut. They decided, we got to make life a little easier. We have to move our hut from the bottom of the mountain to move our hut to the top of the mountain. So it's a hut, so they're pulling and schlepping their house towards the top of the mountain. And as they're pulling and schlepping, Chaim gives a krecht, that's the sigh. And his wife says, why are you sighing? It's because we're so far away from the top of the mountain. So his wife said, yeah, we're far from the top of the mountain, but from blood to Zemeshenares, but at least we're out of the mud. So the Alter was saying, maybe you reached the place you want to reach in your service of Hashem, but you have certainly reached a place that is outside of the mud. And since you're outside of the mud, therefore you are certainly qualified to come to Ataresa. So the feeling of the Mendel of Haradak, I don't want to go out to Hakafis because I haven't understood the Ataresa, sounds very similar to Yaakov. Yaakov is afraid that maybe he's unworthy of God's promise, considering how he's seen all of God's kindness. So he knows Hashem wants him to be higher than he was before. So because Hashem wants him to be higher than he was before, so he feels where he is right now is deficient. And therefore, you see, he is unworthy of God's promise where he is right now. He feels like he's not going to where he is doesn't measure up. Like a Mendel of Haradak felt, I don't measure up now to this new reality. Hashem has revealed to me this new interpretation of Ataresa with this newfound revelation of Chassidus and Torah. I can't make it now to Ataresa. My dancing is not dancing. That's how Yaakov felt. Now we're going to see the similar thing happen with the Alter Rebbe. We're up to page
11. At the onset, maybe I misunderstood, but at the onset, I thought you said something analogous to the Aliyah must be preceded by Yerida in order to have that subsequent Aliyah.
Right.
The story doesn't demonstrate that, except from the perspective of a perspective that one feels a certain way. But are you saying that the actual reality is that one must experience the Yerida in order to have the Aliyah?
What exactly was the Yerida? You're asking, in other words, we're not talking about Averis over here, right? So we're not talking about an actual Yerida, like an Yerida that we would describe.
One achieves a certain level, and he feels deficient when he looks at how high the mountain is above him, or the next peak, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But and that then motivates him to continue. But where is the Yerida?
So Yonatan, even though you weren't here yesterday, I'll recap something yesterday.
Thank you for noticing. Thank you for noticing.
So Panam Yafis, he says that between peak A and the higher peak B, it's not that you've fallen lower than peak A. The falling is not that you've fallen to the ground. You're still higher than peak A, but you haven't reached the level of peak B. So in comparison to peak B, it's a Yerida. But the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in the intro to Shari Chavemuna, he talks about the pasuk, a tzaddik falls 7 times and he rises. And he says that the tzaddik falls completely. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says you have to resort to the faith that you've learned when you were a child. You have to resort to the cultivating that faith you had it when you were a child, because you're losing everything. So, are you at peak A or are you on the floor? So, what we learned yesterday was that there's 2 different ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is that since you're in a state of, the analogy the Rebbe gives is there's 2 speakers. One speaker is better than the other, and now you're in between both speakers. While you're in between both speakers, you're empty. You don't have anything. So in a similar way, the Alter Rebbe, before achieving this higher level of greatness, is in a state of yearning for the level of greatness, yearning for this new level, or the Yaakov is in a state of yearning. He's not there. So there's a state of he's missing something. It's kind of like Reb Zera, who's fasting 100 fasts in order to get to the Jerusalem Talmud. He wants to forget the Babylonian Talmud. His forgetting the Babylonian Talmud is a state of emptiness. He's lost the Babylonian Talmud. But on the other end, the Panam Yafis says you haven't lost the first level. Why? Because this is part and parcel of the elevation. So you could look at this state of I'm missing something. I need something. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. as complete emptiness, or you could look at it as part of the elevation. The Panam Yafis says you're still past the first peak, and the Alter Rebbe says you're on the floor. You are on the floor in the sense that you feel you have nothing. Like the Mendel felt he had nothing. The Alter Rebbe was in prison. Yaakov Avinu felt he's off. That feeling of lack, of I'm missing something, is the descent. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I have to. Reb Zera wants to get the Jerusalem Talmud. He doesn't have the Jerusalem Talmud yet. He's missing the Jerusalem Talmud, and he's missing the Babylonian Talmud too. He's missing everything. So in that void, where there isn't the Babylonian Talmud, where there isn't the Jerusalem Talmud, where the Alter Rebbe doesn't have the we'll see the Alter Rebbe in a second, but Yaakov Avinu doesn't have the higher level of service of Hashem that he's supposed to be at because of the additional, deeper closeness Hashem had shown him. So Yaakov Avinu feels deficient. Does that mean Yaakov Avinu is now doing Averis? No, but he's not in the place he needs to be. He's not. The Yerida is, let me say it this way. The Yerida is that he isn't where he's supposed to be. That's the Yerida. Was he where he was supposed to be a second ago? Yes, because before Hashem showed him that closeness, he was at the level he was supposed to be. But now that Hashem had brought him something new, he isn't where he's supposed to be. That's called the Yerida. The Yerida isn't that he's now doing Averis, Chas Hashem. The Yerida is, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm lacking something. I'm not in the high level I need to be. It wasn't because of his own volition. It's not because Yaakov Avinu did something wrong. It's because of the additional closeness Hashem is showing Yaakov Avinu, so therefore he is missing the higher level he's supposed to be at.
But didn't Yaakov Avinu himself think that he had committed an Avera?
Right. So the Rebbe is saying the word Avera, actually the Torah uses chet. Chet means lacking. It wasn't he actually thought that he actually did an Avera. He felt that he is lacking. Chet means that it says about Sheva, which came before David, and she wanted her son Shlomo Melech to take over the reign of David Melech, and she felt that Adoniyahu was going to take over the monarchy, and she said, I and Shlomo will be chataim. Chataim doesn't mean we'll be sinners, it means we'll be lacking, we'll be missing something. So when it says in the Torah that Yaakov Avinu felt that he sinned, it doesn't actually mean he did Avera. It means that he's lacking something, he's missing where he needs to be.
But when it comes to, don't we use this as a mashal regarding a lack of bitachon?
Yes, that's true. You want to hear it also on Sunday?
Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's true that we're not supposed to emulate their feeling that Hashem wasn't going to help them. That's not something we're supposed to emulate. That's true. But there is something we're going to bring home to ourselves too. Let's go further now. We'll understand also about the Alter Rebbe. Yedua she'inyin. It's known that the main revelation of Chassidus began after Alter Rebbe was liberated from prison, after he left Petersburg and returned home. That's when Chassidus began to be revealed exponentially more than before. This new revelation of Chassidus highlights the great spiritual peak that the Alter Rebbe reached subsequent to his release that was greater than the level he was on before he was imprisoned. Before his new greatness and his original greatness, what did he have in between, Yonatan? Between those two, what did he have? He had the imprisonment. The imprisonment was the descent between the higher level of elevation. The Alter Rebbe he had very deep and many painful things, very deeply painful things happened to Alter Rebbe. The Beditchev Rebbe asked the Alter Rebbe about his imprisonment. Beditchev asked the Alter Rebbe a question, very interesting question. is why did you take so much upon yourself? Why did you take upon yourself, says the Berditchever Rebbe to the Alter Rebbe, the pain that was meant for all the Jewish people, the pain of the Shechina, the pain of the soul, the pain of your body. You're able to accomplish all of these things, says the Berditchever Rebbe, with makifim. Makifim means with transcendent lights. The Berditchever Rebbe was saying something in tzaddik language. I'm not sure that we Neanderthal people could relate to, but he's saying there's an easier way. There's an easier way to cause things to happen with makifim, with transcendent lights of Hashem that he was able to reach without all the pain. Why do you need this pain? Dvarim elu Omar Berditchev l'gabi Aaron shahayu b'divrchim ma'aser atzmi. L'achar mekain eida yisum hotzar v'zakim me'ashar shor shel achar ma'aser. Hashayu hilu avur k'tzagala yisum kol ma'aser. The Berditchev Rebbe was referring to the pain the Alter Rebbe had in prison, but then subsequent to his release, he was brought, instead of being brought home, he was brought to the home of one of his detractors, and he said that he had such pain in that person's home who was chastising the Alter Rebbe. Why did you change the nusach of Kedusha? The nusach of Kedusha was Naritzach. Why did you switch it to Keser? And when the Chassidim found that the Alter Rebbe was taken to the wrong home, they heard him screaming Alter Rebbe, why Keser? Why not Naritzach? So the Alter Rebbe had more pain in this discussion with this detractor of his than he had in the imprisonment itself. So he had tremendous pain. Obviously, the kind of pain the Alter Rebbe has isn't the kind of pain that we experience. So that's why being there was worse than the imprisonment itself. Obviously, for us, that we can't relate to that. If the mikvahs in Los Angeles were all closed and the only place to go was to cut a hole in the ice, so we would consider that to be great pain. But that wouldn't be considered great pain for tzaddikim. Oh, ice, that's what they always did, right? They cut holes in the ice, go to mikveh. So, but the Alter Rebbe did have great pain. Move on. Externally, the Alter Rebbe was on a lower level. He had fallen from his previous greatness. His being in prison, his being in the home of his detractor, was something that had taken him down, so to speak, from where he was before. He was so to The Rebbe Rashab said, we mentioned this a little earlier this week, that it's hard to say this, the Rebbe Rashab said, but this is the truth, that the revelation that the Alter Rebbe experienced and revealed after Petersburg is similar to what the Talmud says about the Jewish people. The Talmud says the Jewish people are like an olive. When the olive is crushed, the oil comes out. From this parable of the olive, it's understood that the Alter Rebbe had experienced, he was, so to speak, lacking. Not only was he lacking in comparison to where he had to get to, he was missing what he had before. He was missing the greatness and the revelation and the light that he experienced before imprisonment. What happens when you crush an olive? While the olive is under that pressure, the olive has no virtue at all. The olive, while it's being crushed, doesn't have its future virtue. It's not yet able to provide light to the world. And it's not a fruit anymore. So it's not a fruit, and it's not something that can provide light. What is it? It's just smushed. It does not have fruit, and it's not oil. Before it was crushed, it's true it was not able to provide light, but at least you could eat it. At least it was a fruit. While it's being crushed, you lose that virtue as well. So similar way, the Alter Rebbe, that while the imprisonment was going on, he was missing something. Not only was Chassidus not able to be spread while he was in prison in the same way that it was going to be after he left, but while he was in prison, he couldn't spread Chassidus the same way he had it before. He was missing both what he was going to do And what he had already before was taken from him. He was no longer able to reveal chassidus like he was before. Inyan zeh shebetkufa hi lo yosef shor sahafik chassidus kosher alagam azakan atzmei. It wasn't just something that we were missing as chassidim, that we weren't able to hear from the Alter Rebbe chassidus, but there's something that hurt him personally, something that affected him personally. It wasn't only in regards to his outreach and his promoting and revealing chassidus to others, as we find by Avram Avinu. When Avram Avinu was unable to bring guests to his home because he didn't have any guests, he felt very terribly. Next page, next column, Avram Avinu was trying to do kindness to who? To people that were alive before the Torah was given, specifically to people who were very low kinds of people. And yet he had such pain that he couldn't give kindness to them. He was missing something. Now consider this. The Alter Rebbe is living post-Sinai, after the giving of the Torah. And he's not trying to do kindness to anyone else other than his fellow Jews. And what kind of kindness is he trying to give? Not trying to give them some gefilte fish or some kugel. He's trying to give them Torah. And not just trying to give them Torah, giving Torah to a group of people, to a rabbim, to a community. And not just to a community, not just Torah. He wants to give them the innermost parts of Torah. And now that he can't do that, if Avram Avinu had such pain when he couldn't be kind to his guests, can you imagine the pain that Alter Rebbe had, who was not able to share the chassidus? Let's go to that's why he writes, I have become smaller. I become smaller, I become humbled. He felt he's missing something, and therefore undeserving of the promise of Baal Shem Tov. Every year, when we experience again the 19th of Kislev, everything is repeated again. And therefore, on the Shabbos before the 19th of Kislev, or like this year, on the 19th of Kislev itself, we're going to again read this pasuk. I have become smaller. I have lost merit, like Rashi says, or I have become humble, like the Alter Rebbe says, because of all the kindness of Hashem. And this is a request of Yaakov Avinu, and a request of all the tzaddikim, who are successors of Yaakov Avinu. The word leader in Hebrew, Jewish leader, is an acronym for the words spark of Yaakov Avinu. Every Jewish leader has in him a spark of Jacob in him, spark of Yaakov Avinu. So the request of Yaakov Avinu is echoed in his successors and all the Jewish leaders, including the request of the Alter Rebbe. What was his request? That they pray for every Jew. Despite the fact that I have become smaller, that I'm missing something, nevertheless, we ask Hashem, they should fulfill a promise in us, Heitiv imach, that I will, Yaakov told Hashem, you promised me that you will do good with me. And you will make my children as many as the sand of the sea that cannot be counted because of the abundance. So just like the first Yitzchak Kislev, the Alter Rebbe had his request that Chassidus should continue. And so too, every year, there is an additional prayer and request that we have of the Eibishter, despite the fact that there is a katanti, despite the fact there is something that's missing, we ask the Eibishter that his promise should be fulfilled. Heitiv imach. There is something that we can relate to in regards to how imprisonment adds something to a person. But by the Alter Rebbe, it's something altogether different. Take, for example, Natan Sharansky. Sharansky was one of the proponents of Zionism, and he and his wife were married a day before his wife's visa expired. So she had to leave the day after their wedding to Israel. And right before she left, his husband told her, don't worry, you can go now. I will meet you in Israel soon. The soon didn't really happen. He tried to get permission to leave. He wasn't given permission. He was a chess master. He was a scientist. They won't let him go. And what happened was that he tried to put pressure through the United States, through the president, through others, and the KGB didn't take kindly to his pressure. As we all know, that the Rebbe was very against trying to make public display of pressure from. It just doesn't work. Didn't work with the KGB. The public display of pressure. Instead, the KGB came to arrest him. He said when the KGB came to arrest him, he was able to grab some stuff from his house. So he saw he had just gotten a gift. His wife had sent him a package in the mail. The package was, one among other things, a tehillim. His wife said, I just feel that you need this. So he took the tehillim with him, and he went into the prison, and the KGB said, this is not a library. They took the tehillim away from him. And for several years, he is in solitary confinement. They tied his hands, tied his feet, and he's in terrible pain. And finally, someone had Rahmanas on him, and they gave him the tehillim. He went on a hunger strike. I want my tehillim back. You're not getting your tehillim. After who knows how long, they finally gets the tehillim back. And he gets the tehillim back. Next day, he finds out that his father dies. He felt that God had given him this sign to him, and a sign at a time of complete like confusion. Hashem wants to tell him, I'm with you. So he really gravitated and tried to learn the tehillim. Now, he didn't really speak Hebrew. I mean, the most Hebrew he knew was because of the Ulpan and Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom. You can't really speak Hebrew from Ya'aseh Shalom. You certainly can't understand the tehillim. Torah scholars who learn Gemara, they don't know how to read Tehillim. It's a different subject. You have to study the commentaries to know what the Tehillim means. But he really cared to know what the Tehillim meant. So he sat down and he wrote down the words of Tehillim, and he wrote them and he tried to piece together word to word, letter to letter, trying to figure out the Tehillim. And after being in prison for such a long time and working on the Tehillim, he still didn't understand too much of Tehillim until he got to chapter 23 of Tehillim. Got to chapter 23 of Tehillim, got up to the pasuk, Lo ira ra ki ata imadi. I will fear no evil because you are with me. So this was the first message of Tehillim that he actually understood. Not just understood, this was like a lightning flash in his head. He may be over there stuck in prison, but he's not by himself. He's there as a messenger of God. He has a mission over there. He's meant to accomplish something. And I will not be afraid because God is with me. That, he said, that's what sustained him. Throughout, he's given a sentence of 13 years in prison. What sustained him was this possibly. So his subsequent arrival in Israel and what he accomplished in Israeli politics and other things was all because of his imprisonment, and that brought out within him a different kind of greatness as a result of the imprisonment. So that's not what we're referring to over here. We're not referring to Alter Rebbe being suffering physically in prison. We're referring to something else. The Alter Rebbe feels he's unable to share chassidus. Like Aaron is unable to share, he's unable to take care of his guests. So the Alter Rebbe feels I cannot share chassidus. He has a much greater pain than Sharansky has when he's in the physical pain that he has doesn't come close to the spiritual pain of the Alter Rebbe. And this spiritual pain evoked within him this deeper revelation of chassidus that continues every year to illuminate the world in a greater way than ever before. Every year, the 19th of Kislev, a new light of Hashem comes to the world that was never there before. And in comparison to this new light, we're, so to speak, in a state of katointi, in a state of smallness, before this new light is revealed. And there's a request that Eibusha should reveal to us what we're asking for, which is the Bias HaMashiach, that not just should be a little bit more revelation, a little bit more. We're asking for Katointi Kolach Sodim. We want Heitiv Imach. The Eibusha should give us the real goodness, Bias HaMashiach. And any questions, comments, criticism, tomatoes, or cucumbers? All right. Have a great day, Yonatan. Great day, David. Great day, Aryeh. Great day, Mchamarach. Great day, Beryl. Great day, Dr. Ressman.